Hello and welcome to Audible River. I'm Alan Rice, and I am very happy to have with me John Creger, who is an education consultant providing professional development for Deepened Learning. John is co-founder of the Personal Creed organization and author of the Personal Creed Project and a New Vision of Learning. As a public school teacher, John has received several awards, including the James Moffett Memorial Award for Teacher Research. And John is a longtime personal friend. Hi, John. It's great to see you, man.
Hi, Alan. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be at the verge of a conversation with you.
Thank you. I wanted to just jump right in and give me your thoughts. Explain what deepened learning is.
Well, I'll tell you how it started, and let's go from there.
Okay.
It started when I was probably in high school, and the kind of learning that I experienced there was very unsatisfying, to the point that when I left high school, I had no inclination whatsoever to enter a classroom for many years after that.
Wow.
It was the furthest thing from my mind. In fact, even in high school, classroom was the furthest thing from my mind, because it was so unsatisfying.
Now, I wanted to ask you, when you say unsatisfying, what was unsatisfying about it?
I think I had a lot of need to understand more about who I was.
Oh,
It seemed like square one. I mean, I wasn't consciously thinking, wait a minute, I'm not getting square one here. But I think now looking back on it, my dissatisfaction comes from not being recognized as a person. I think you could say that. Not just being recognized as some kind of repository of the knowledge that the system wanted me to ingest, but that I would be some kind of live growing entity that should be respected and cultivated. I think that's what I would have needed, and that's not what I got.
wow. So you weren't feeling recognized as a person even.
I think that's one way of kind of saying a lot in a few words.
Yeah.
And then many years later, the last place I thought I would end up would be in the front of a high school classroom, because it was the back of a high school classroom was one of the worst experiences that I'd had, for those reasons that we've already touched on. So lots of stepping stones, speed bumps, and journeys down different roads led me to becoming a high school teacher. And immediately, without too much conscious thinking about it, I wanted my students to have a more satisfying experience than I had had. And so in my first or second year, I think of my second year in the classroom, I began to think, look, I want my students to learn as much about themselves as they learn about reading, writing, having good conversations, and thinking. And so that became a goal early on. And I think as the years went on, I had the opportunity to first I experimented in the classroom with that rough goal in mind. And then I had the chance to think back on what we had tried together, the students and I, and what it meant. And I had lots of conversations with many people, including yourself, Alan, about what I was experiencing. And as time went on, I began to call it deepened learning, and that has more of it has more context to it than that we could talk about as we go on, if you like.
So when you, one of the things that caught my attention in what you said is that you you had the goal of helping these students learn about themselves. What is it that you think that what did you think they needed to learn about themselves? How would they learn about themselves? What is it there about themselves that needed to be learned?
Those are some good questions. Mm, I might have to do some editing here, Alan. Um, I think it's kind of an abstract answer to say they needed to have a sense of their identities. Um, they, in the particular years that when I was in high school, it was in the middle of the Vietnam War. There was uh, an active drug culture that many of my friends were falling into, and some of them never managed to come out. Um, and there were we were at the end of a decade of riots and assassinations and lots of disturbing events and trends. And so, um, what did I want for my students? I wanted them to be grounded in something more solid than my friends and I had been in our day. Um, I think I mentioned, well, I didn't mention that 5 or 6 of my friends didn't make it into their adult lives in good shape. The last one died as a homeless drug addict I think in his late 50s.
Wow.
And I I wanted my students to have a clearer sense of who they were and how that came out in the classroom was I wanted them to have a chance to reflect on their life experience in a very comprehensive and hopefully enlightening way. So they would have a clear understanding of who they were um, in kind of a widescreen sense, if that makes sense.
Well, it does. You know what, John? I'm going to get a few background bits. So, how long were you? What did you teach? How long did you teach?
Yeah, I was a high school English teacher. I still
Hmm.
kind of feel like I am.
Hmm.
And I taught 35 years, beginning in the late 80s, 87, and ending in 2023. I taught at American High School in Fremont, California. And I taught primarily sophomores, which would be 15 and 16-year-olds.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. You just said 35 years, right?
Mhm.
Wow. So, for 35 years, you had the focus of helping these students learn about themselves. Now, I mean, the first thing that I think of is like, who in public education has that kind of dedication, has that kind of focus for 35 years? But you use the format of a classroom. Obviously, you were teaching other things. I mean, you taught for 35 years, so obviously you did a good job teaching. They kept you on that long. But you had this other aspect that you were developing, and this is the part that's really interesting to me is like, why did you do this? And like, what was the responses and what did you see change over the years as you were trying different things?
Why did I do it? It's almost, how could I not do it?
Okay. Yeah.
That, that that's how it was for me. Goodness, I think a friend, actually a friend of ours, Alan, used to sing a song. How can I keep from singing? If you remember who I'm talking about here.
Yeah, I do.
Uh, I mean, it's kind of like that. I mean, here I am in the classroom, and teenagers are very inspiring to be around for me.
Okay.
Uh, I just find them to be. I am inspired by their presence. They are emerging adults in bodies that are kind of part child and part adult, and an adult is coming out of each one of them in various ways and in various uh, well, let's just say in various ways. And So I wanted to give them something that would really help them with their become who they're meant to become. Um, and I think I just knew that I could do that, right?
That's a huge job. I mean, a huge
I
thing to
just knew that
think
I
that.
could do that.
That's a huge thing to believe that you can do. But I mean, I do know you, and I know that this was successful. But I want to get more. How did you? Okay, so you developed some things in the classroom. You developed some programs, and you. So talk about what you did in a practical manner that was that looked like education, but it had other purpose involved.
Right. Well, as an English teacher, you're responsible for helping students, first of all, think clearly.
Hmm.
And that, traditionally involves analyzing, learning to identify facts, uh, help facts, come into being evidence and trying to make a point. So writing instruction, certainly you're helping students read, um, uh, and uh, learning to have conversations. All of these are transformative, um, in their own right, right?
Yeah.
Become a writer, learning to think of yourself as a writer, to allow reading to enter you and work sometimes the magical influence it has on us. Um, and even more than those, I think, is conversation.
Ah.
When more than one person come together, um, and so how did I do it? Okay, I'll give you a quick example. On day one, I had a tradition. I don't remember I don't remember a time before when I started doing this. I would say, okay, what have you brought on day one to class that what's the most precious thing you brought to class on this first day of the year?
Interesting. Precious. Okay.
Precious. Now that I say that could be a thing, could be a material thing, it could be non-material. Think about it, write about it for a few minutes, and then talk to each other about it, right? So they would do that, and then we'd have some volunteers share what was the most precious thing they brought to class. And some would say their phones, right? At least in recent years. Some would say this ring that my boyfriend gave me. Um, some would say my sense of ambition. I'm ambitious. I'm. Some would say um, I brought my they'd get silly and they'd say, yeah, I brought my lunch box, I brought my lunch to school. If it was fourth period right before lunch, they might answer that way. Um, and so I'd listen, and I'd be in the process. I'm getting to know everybody on day one, and they're getting to know what kind of class this is going to, getting to know the teacher a little bit. And so I'd say, yeah, obviously every answer is correct. Every answer is interesting to me. And here's my answer. I would give them my answer after they'd had the chance to give theirs. And my answer is, I think the most precious thing that each of us brought is our personality,
Oh,
right?
that's a really thought provoker.
Yeah, it is. So I put this into their minds, and I say, yeah, personality. Now, some say, I don't want to preach here, but some say that the personalities are completely unique. I mean, that my personality and your personality, what's your name over here? Jose? Yeah, Jose's got a personality that nobody else in the universe has. And maybe this universe is filled with other universes that scientists are looking at possibility of this being a multiverse now, right? And so maybe there are other living beings in other universes, in other parts of the universe, the multiverse, but Jose's got the only personality like his anywhere. And I said, now, and that's true for every one of us. And the computer shuffled us all together. right? Here we are in this room. The computer shuffled us together. Completely unique personalities. No precedent for any of us anywhere in the universe. And for the first time in the history of the universe, this particular group of unique personalities has been assembled thanks to this roll sheet here, right?
Wow, that's a pretty amazing, adventurous way of looking at. This is a group of people in a classroom. I mean, to me, I'm hearing that, and and it's like, what an exciting kind of way of looking around at the people that you're with, and
Yeah,
thinking of that, like, well, this is like the here and now of it, a unique opportunity, and so
absolutely.
your way of drawing attention to that. I mean, that must have been. So, what do you recall? What kind of reactions you would get from your kids in the classroom?
Well, I didn't look bored as a rule, especially after I said, now here we are, and this has never happened before. And my last kind of point was, and there's no way to predict what's going to happen, how this is going to unfold over the next 9 or 10 months,
Wow.
because this we're each coming with a personality
Hmm.
that has never been, you're the only one, and and then sometimes I'll say, one of my criticisms of school is that we don't pay much attention to these things called personalities here, do we?
Uh-huh.
And right away, they start nodding their heads.
So they can identify with that, just like
They
you did when you were in high school.
absolutely,
No one,
yeah,
no one's paying attention to who they are as a person.
right,
As
right.
the institution isn't really
The
look
institution, they might
isn't.
say, well, no, what's your favorite color? Some kids have written that in their responses, because one of the things one of the ways I kind of tried to ride herd on this, is that I got a lot of feedback from them. Sometimes in the middle of a semester, I'd have them write a little evaluation. What have you enjoyed so far? What's helped you learn so far? What could be better? What's missing here? And so I got a lot of feedback all along, at the end of each semester, certainly, but sometimes along the way too. And I remember one student one student said, uh, uh, "There's a point of the year when the self-discovery kind of comes to a climax. Particular presentation in the spring of the year, um, and one student, in response to the course in a general, she said, 'Is this even legal curriculum?'" She said that.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Right?
Well,
And I, I,
she.
I was I was very happy to hear that.
Oh my God. Yes. Right. That's right. If she's thinking it's illegal, then it must be good, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's really unfortunately it's
Uh-huh.
quite different from what most of us experience in school.
Yeah. So obviously you're getting the kids' attention, and that you're recognizing something that's kind of been missing in the relationship with their schooling. But what do you think? What are the educational benefits that you see in this method of reaching kids this way? Is there an educational benefit?
Well, I think so. I think you get a kind of engagement, that just the big problem in most schools and districts is how to engage the kids in the curriculum, right?
Hmm.
And it there's lots of kind of add-on exterior approaches, like social and emotional learning, which is a it's not that new, but school districts will buy social and emotional learning programs, and you know uh, kind of drip them into the students' into the classrooms, the veins of the classroom. You
Okay.
know, you have a program every month, but this is a little different. The entire curriculum is based on you understanding who you are. Actually, the way I think of it, I think I mentioned earlier that as time went on, I began to think about what I was observing in the classroom with all these experiments uh, that my students and I were doing, and So I came up with what's the central aim here? What are we really trying to do? And I'm not saying this is final, right?
Hmm.
Because I think that conversation, even the one we're having right now,
Hmm.
is more powerful than anything that's been defined so far. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So right, so that I'm gonna put out these two central aims that I've come up with, but I really want other people's feedback, other educators' feedback, um, people like yourself, who well-informed, articulate, good thinkers, and we're going to refine this if we can keep the conversation going
Hmm.
more and more. So I think about two central aims of learning and therefore curriculum, right?
Hmm.
One is a deepening understanding of ourselves and others and the world and the universe that we live in. Deeper understanding is the point there.
Ourselves, others, and the universe that we live in. This is relationships and of ourself to other people and you say universe. That's a big picture.
Yeah, well, I usually just say world, but
You like
you know,
we like
you,
universe today.
deeper understanding of self, others, and world.
Okay, go on.
That point, the first point, and the second point, what I see as a central aim of learning, increasing mastery of human capacities.
Wow. Increasing mastery. So
Hmm.
that recognizes a growth aspect in the individual. That
Yes,
yes,
yeah.
and that you are helping them adapt to the world with this mastery. That it's
In fact, both of them begin with verbs that are ongoing. You know, the tense of the verb is ongoing, deepening understanding
uh
and increasing mastery, so that it's a moving target. It isn't fixed.
wow. Okay. And what else? So these are the two main focuses that you have in the deepened learning. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Wow. And so tell me more about these specific. You mentioned something about the this major project that you have in the classroom. I want to I want to hear more about that. So you developed a specific program that was unique in your classroom. So I want to hear about this.
Sure. All right. Yeah, this was my second or third year uh, in teaching. It was either my first or second year teaching sophomores. I don't know whether that is somehow prophetic. The word sophomore in Greek means soph means wisdom and or wise, and more means fool, like a moron, right?
Okay.
So so sophomore in Greek means wise fool. And so there's something about this particular age group, 15 and 16, that even the Greeks noticed was there was something, and I've talked to many teachers who have this similar observation that 15 and 16 years old, maybe it's the shaping that our system, forces on us, but as ninth graders, freshmen were immature, um, were, were kind of not really ready to take a bigger look at things. As juniors, we're way focused on college and survival in the future. But as sophomores, our capacities to see ourselves from a larger perspective begins to shift into gear. And I noticed that early on. And um, out of that realization, I began to well, it kind of came out all at once, and I don't really pretend to understand exactly how I step by step thought of this, but I guess I could say I invented this project called the Personal Creed Project, and the purpose of it was to help students systematically um, reflect on their lives in various categories, I guess you could say, from various perspectives, and this was a writing assignment. So this is perfectly appropriate for an English class,
Hmm.
uh, except they're writing about themselves, which is not, believe it or not, it's not a typical high school English writing assignment to really write in a long-term comprehensive manner. Um, they wind up doing, and there's different versions of this project. In fact, there is even a kindergarten version. There's a second and third and a fourth grade version that other teachers have created. But in my version,
But wait a
there
minute,
are,
but that was based on yours. I mean, you generated
yes,
this originally, right? Okay, all right, go
yes,
ahead.
yes, but it's adaptable, and there's college versions of it as well. Uh, but the basic design of it is they do a series of reflections in high school classroom. For me, these reflections took 2 to 3 months, weekly reflections. And every week they talk a little bit about it with their teammates. We talk about it as a class. And that's the first part, is these reflections. And the second part is a presentation. And the presentation is really a rite of passage in the high school classroom. It's a it's a celebration of self-discovery in the classroom community. I think that's the best way to put it.
Wow, wow.
Right. And the way it's developed, and it came out reasonably full-fledged in the beginning. Um, and I'm actually in touch with students who graduated in 1996, and they remember the personal creed presentations. Um, but these presentations, which is the second part of the personal creed, the reflections first, then the presentations. In these presentations, each student stands in front of the class, and there's many ways to do this. You can do this in a creative project, a song, a dance, a martial arts demonstration, a video, a poem, a song. I mean, I've seen it all. I've had to duck in a martial arts demonstration at once. Um, but lots of creativity, and they have to deliver four elements in this presentation. First, what and who are the main influences that have shaped you so far in your life?
Okay.
And these reflections that I mentioned earlier, these reflections have provided them the answers to that question.
Oh, I see. So they've already been pondering on this, and then now they're going to
Yes.
write about it. What and
Well,
who?
they've written about it,
Uh-huh.
yes, and that's the pondering.
Okay.
They've written, and over the course of weeks and 2 to 3 months of weekly reflections, and there are shorter versions again. Um, they have reflected upon what and who have influenced them, the people who've influenced them, the circumstances, the experiences, even the questions, and their own personal qualities. They've they spent a week on each one of these types of things, and then they've distilled all those reflections into a short list of maybe maybe 3 to 5 most significant influences. And then from those influences, they decide what values are important to me. This is the forces that have shaped me. Well, now what do I stand for? And that's what the presentation primarily revolves around.
The values that you've
Right.
recognized from the things that you decided have influenced you. Because I guess if a person is reflecting on what has influenced me, then you're making a value judgment right there in that moment that this is important somehow,
Yes,
right? Okay,
right. But they do it in um, with lots of gestation time.
got it.
Okay, so over a course of a week, let's say the first week, they look at their background, the background circumstances of their lives, the culture I come from, neighborhood I grew up in. Am I the firstborn or the 12th born, in
Hmm.
the family? Um, what kind of generation am I part? What generation am I part of? Right? Um, what's the role of technology? This is a big one today. So lots of different possible influences to reflect upon to whittle it down, and I need to choose the 3 to 5 most significant for me, and then I boil it down further. So yes, it is a judgment, as you mentioned. It's kind of a judgment call, but it also has a certain amount of empirical reality to it.
Okay. because these are things that like actually happened in their life. These are things that are
Yes.
real to them. It isn't. It's not abstract. These are like yeah, right. I see
Exactly.
what you're saying. Right. So that's important because you're. Well, I think I get what you're talking about here because you're anchoring whatever it is you're talking about into something that's actually happened. So a real person, a real event. That okay. So you've anchored it there. Wherever you go, where you're going next.
Right. And you've never had the chance to really do this before,
I see.
ever, especially as a teenager. You've
Ah,
never had the chance to take all this experience you've had and make some sense out of it.
that's a big
Uh,
deal.
not because I, the teacher, have given you all this wisdom, right? Oh
Hmm.
yeah, here, yeah. It's because you yourself have made some choices, understanding which influences have been most significant, and therefore what values matter most to me at this point in my life as I'm moving toward adulthood.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. And then what's the next step in this process?
Okay, so four elements in the presentations. One, these are the forces and people that have shaped me. Two, these are the values that I'm realizing are the most important to me now at this point in my life. Things change, so do values.
Hmm.
Third is what qualities do I need to develop in myself in order to live by these values,
Oh, I
right?
see. So like deciding what your values are is a kind of commitment.
Yes.
When you reach that, you proclaim it, and now you're going to own it, so to speak. Right?
In front of your classmates, right?
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
you don't want to make a complete fool of yourself. And
Maybe a half full.
as I did the first time a student asked me what my creed was,
Okay.
I I almost fell on the floor. Um, yeah. So the third part is and if I'm really going to stand for compassion, I'm going to need more patience than I have now. You know,
Okay.
not being so judgmental, let's say. So I need patience if I'm going to stand for compassion or justice or whatever value I choose, right?
Hmm.
So that's the third part. And the fourth part is the last part is what difference do I want to make by living these values in the world?
Oh,
How do I how do I um, uh, how do I want to help others or the world by living these values?
wow. That's kind of a well. I mean, it can be a big question. That's huge, and you're looking towards the
Huge.
future. You're imagining your relationship to the world again. So, wow, this is very dynamic. I see a lot going on there, and when we talk about deep and learning, you would have to reach deep
Yeah.
and then also too what you're doing with this I recognize is that you're honoring the individual's assessment of themselves and what they have to offer in their own wisdom as is a word that you use so that
Yeah.
you're I mean this is a huge kind of empowerment I guess is maybe a word that comes to mind of for that person and the educational benefit is just incidental maybe but huge at the same time because I understand that you are learning how to present yourself, you're learning how to write, you're learning how to communicate and have these conversations, so it's really interesting in my mind the way that I see all this, that the education part just kind of happens naturally when you're doing this process. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, at the end of the instruction packet I used up until the last few years, because the project now has an online version. But in 2012, Common Core came into national standards that were embraced in a process that is a whole other conversation. But um, so this project meets 6 out of 10 Common Core standards in writing,
Wow.
just more than half of them, because there's lots of you do your reflection, but then you're encouraged every week to go back and look at previous reflections and add more, change things that need to be changed. So you're getting practice in revision,
Okay.
which is something that, frankly, English teachers have a hard time finding a lot of instructional time to give to revision. But this allows you to really students to really go back and reflect more. So 6 out of 10 anchor standards for writing and 6 out of 6 anchor standards for speaking and listening
Wow.
because of the presentation.
So that makes it legal, right? Get back to your.
Exactly. Yeah, because you really have to reckon with the riptides, let's put it that way,
Mhm.
in education, because one of the reasons I was able to develop this project is that I started teaching before we had national or state standards.
Oh, right.
And it was kind of some say the Wild West when I started teaching in the late 80s, early 90s.
Hmm.
And um, we even had thought leaders at the time in the field of English teaching that encouraged us to have students reflect. And in the early mid 90s in California, reflection was actually a um, a requirement. It was a statewide assessment called the California Assessment Program. Reflection was something that teachers were asked to assess. In other words, we had to teach reflection.
Okay.
That came and went rather quickly.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah, John. So now you are working as you do consulting work. Yeah, and like I said in the beginning, that you are providing professional development for deepened learning. So obviously, you must have some vision in mind, right, for the future of education. What it is that you like really, really wish deeply to impart to the people that you consult with, the way that you impact education now that you are, have your own business and helping other teachers. Think about. I want to, hear your thoughts about the future of education, I guess, and what you would like to see happen.
Well, I think this is also a conversation about inches and miles, right?
Okay.
It's easy to for a person who thinks like I do, it's easy to go out to the edges of the cosmos and say, well, I would like us to be out there. Um, you know,
Uh-huh.
but I think a more reasonable short-term goal is that I realized about 6 years ago, I was interviewed by another podcaster actually,
Hmm.
who uh, is a developmental psychologist. He's a holistic educator and a developmental psychologist, and his name is Bob Lovemore, and he and his wife Josette have come up with developmental stages that are there are 4 developmental stages in their system of childhood, and for each one of these stages, um, you have certain needs that children have during those stages. For teenagers, the 2 main needs they need to establish solid senses of identity that'll help them transition into adulthood, number
Hmm.
one.
Okay.
Number two, they need to become increasingly autonomous as teenagers,
Right.
right? And so if and they're different. So there are certain ways that the Lovemores uh, recommend that we help students as teenagers become uh, have a clearer sense of their identities and become more autonomous. As it turns out, the Personal Creed Project is a very effective means of accomplishing both. Um, but the Personal Creed Project is just one teacher's um, invention that is quite adaptable. What I would like to see is I would like to see an intermediate step. What I recommend is that schools and teachers develop a second leg of curriculum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're not gonna completely dismantle the overly academic, narrow, um, um, exclusion of personality that we have now. No, we can weave in a second leg of curriculum. I call it the developmental leg of curriculum, so that you take into account the developmental stage of your students, and you design that second leg. And that's what I like to help teachers do, is design a second leg of curriculum so that the developmental needs of the students can be woven into their curriculum. And actually, as you already pointed out, you can have a single assignment, like the Personal Creed Project, is just an example that both help students establish a clearer sense of their identities and helps them develop the academic writing skills they need um, on the academic leg of curriculum. So I would like to introduce the idea of two-legged curriculum, with the second leg being a leg that enriches the student's experience of learning because it helps them understand who they are and who they're becoming.
So, I mean, I can just imagine how important this is to individuals, but I want to hear, I mean, obviously, so education in the past has felt more like training, right? I mean, like, it's like, okay, all right,
Yeah,
you gotta get the whip out. You gotta like, you gotta learn your
very
times
much so.
tables. You gotta,
Still is very much. Most teachers are trapped in that whip leading kind of approach.
yeah.
I've done a fair amount of it too.
But I mean, because I've heard other people talk about this too. I mean, and we think, oh, well, it's up to the parents to take this side of it. But what if our educational institutions, just like what you're talking about, is recognizing the whole person? I mean, that's kind of how I'm seeing it. Is recognizing, like, well, you talked about developmental stages. I mean, to the point of like at different ages, they're going to need different things, and
Yeah.
so then. I'm going to get your thoughts about, well, does that kind of change what we're expecting from education? I mean, ideally, I would love to hear your ideals. I get the practical side of it. I get that. Okay, right. How many years will we ever get that? But I want to know more about your ultimate goals. I mean, your ideals that you would love to see.
Oh, you want me to go out to the
I
edges?
do. I do. I want to hear it. I want to know what that is.
Well, okay. Um, yeah, well, I'd like to see our education system be able to graduate students from high school who have a strong sense of who they are, um, and what difference they want to make and how they want to contribute, right? And I would like um, the deepened part of learning to be much more a part of their experience. Now, you notice that the word, it's not deeper and it's not deep, but I call it deepened because I want to convey that this is something we can do to the current approach we have. We can change the current approach we have. I have a model of learning that doesn't translate into a podcast very well.
Okay.
Um, uh, but what it entails is a part of learning that is pretty much not part of the curriculum, and it centers on wisdom, helping students develop wisdom. It centers on helping them discover values at every stage of development, and it answers the question, who are we? We have a strand of curriculum that helps people. When I say they graduate knowing who they are, it's not accidental. It's part of our system that helps them at every stage in a way that is appropriate for their stage. So therefore, they develop with a um, the hallmarks, I would say, of deepened learning would be, I already mentioned, a clearer sense of identity. I would also, you mentioned relationships.
Hmm.
Uh, when we have clearer senses of who we are, where we can we can create and maintain richer, deeper relationships. Um, I would like to see us graduate from high school with a more of a sense of community than I certainly did. Um, Originality is a part of it, creativity, even soul. Soul is something I'm currently writing about, and it's not appropriate for a high school teacher in public school system to teach students about their souls, right? But what I've found is that students write on their own about their souls when they're given permission and guidance to reflect upon their lives. They write about their souls.
Well, the
And
soul certainly comes up a lot in literature. I mean,
it
and
certainly does.
yes.
It certainly does. And what I've done is find places in my students' writing where it came up, and I'm going to be writing about that as a suggestion that our students are a lot, I don't know, deeper and richer than we think they are. You know, they have souls, and they're, to some degree, they're aware of the fact that they have souls. Whether they can talk about it or not, in a moment is one thing, but when they're given the kind of learning experience that nurtures them, they might realize things about themselves they never had before.
My goodness, John, this is I love this. I love this conversation. So, if somebody wanted to learn more about what you do, if they wanted to reach out to you to personally to discuss in more detail what your thoughts and how you can offer training or advice, how would they reach you, or what would you suggest?
Well, in the last week of my teaching career, it was in the June of last year, June of 2023. A student I had the previous year came to visit me in my classroom, and he knew that I was leaving the classroom. I don't use the R word. I call it repurposing. And so he said, "Mr. Creger, I know you're leaving the classroom, and I'm starting an organization called the Personal Creed Organization. I'm hoping you'd like to be involved."
Wow.
And so I obviously was very happy and was very willing to be involved. And another student in the current year that it had me, another student also agreed to come, and the three of us started this organization called the Personal Creed Organization. We've now added another member who's an educator and an entrepreneur who's very knowledgeable about building a community and using social media to develop ideas. So, long answer to a short question. You can go to our site. You can go to our site, personalcreed.com, www.personalcreed.com. And there you can find out more about the project. You can find out about the trainings that I offer. And you can find out about the community that we're starting. We have a monthly Personal Creed Community Day, the first Sunday of every month.
Mm-hmm.
And every week we have a Tuesday salon, and we basically discuss things. In fact, we spent the last 4 or 5 weeks discussing the soul. What is the soul?
Well,
And we've different answers to that question.
That's a deep subject. Wow.
And actually, that event is co-anchored by a former student of mine who's now 20 years old, and this is all young people are very much involved in all these activities. Currently, we have the first summer Personal Creed cohort, and I think Daniel, another former student, he's one of the co-founders of the Personal Creed organization. He's going to be a senior next year. He's leading a cohort of about 10 people over the summer in the online version of the Personal Creed project. So we can make all these resources available to anyone, and we're trying to gear up to be able to do that.
Wow, that's amazing! Amazing. Well, this is great, John. So you got a great second act going here, and the big thing that has impressed me is like how close you are still to your students. I mean, that they're coming to you. That what an impression that you've made on them. I mean, the proof is in the pudding there. I mean, the thoughtfulness that you put into recognizing these students for who they are, they're bringing it back to you. I mean, that's what I'm seeing. It's a wonderful gift that you've given and received in return. I'm just I'm very happy to know you as a friend and to be part of this journey that you've been on all this time.
Well, thank you, Alan. Coming from you, that means a lot. And as you've been one of my main thinking partners through all of this.
Okay, well,
I'll tell you though that just leaving the classroom and not being around young people, that to me is a fate worse than death almost. So I'm very grateful that these former students are working with. I'm working with them. I mean, it's not like I'm the director here. We're working together, and I have the chance to keep getting other former students involved. I was recently interviewed by a former student who's now a professor of journalism. for example.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So no, my relationships with these former students, that's probably the main thing that I love about doing all these things that we're doing.
Yes. Well, that's because you're a lovable guy, John. And, and I want to thank you very much for being part of the Audible River. And that is all for this episode of Audible River. And I love hearing from our listeners. So if you have any thoughts to share about our podcast, please email us at audibleriverpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.